Mike Damergis here at CitiField with Jim Duquette, former GM, and Jim now in the broadcast booth enjoying things. So the Mets a surprise early on this season, Jim.
Yeah, they've been a big surprise. I think when you look at before the season started, you weren't quite sure about the starting rotation, how much depth they've had, but they've held it together with the Pelfrey injury in particular. The four main starters, of course, Santana starting tonight has been really, really good. Not quite what you expected when you first got him in the trade, but he's been really almost pitching at a number one caliber level. And look at Neese has been a little inconsistent, but he's been solid. We know G and Dickey, you can almost count him as a number two starter, even though it's a little unconventional. I think the starting rotation has been more surprising than anything else.
Okay, one of the positives, of course, is David Wright. He seems to have things on track so far.
You know what's been impressive about him? I've had a long-standing relationship with him when I was here. Was he's made a change to his approach to hitting, and he's lowered his hands a little bit, and he's got a much more level swing. He's not swinging at pitches out of the strike zone. He's much more selective, and with that, you haven't seen as much power, but you've seen him hitting for the high average, like you talked about. He's been up there around 400, which is no man's land. But he's cooled off a little bit. But I think overall, I think you're going to see the power come as it starts to get warmer.
What about Johan Santana? He's looked good early on.
Santana's been amazing. What's interesting watching him is he's throwing his slider more than he has in past years, and that's if you go back to when he was with the Twins. He won 20 games. He's his first Cy Young. He threw his slider a lot then too. Now, his fastball wasn't the same that it was, in terms of velocity now than back then. It's probably about 5 miles an hour less, but he's got that great add and subtract between the fastball and changeup that's made him really good.
And a couple of concerns still, of course, Jason Bay and Ike Davis. You think Ike Davis will get out of his funk?
Boy, you see little pieces of improvement with Ike. It's not the leaps and bounds that you like to see, but you do see some progress. First off, he's not beating himself up emotionally and mentally. That's part of, I think, the process of getting out of this funk. And you're starting to see him take better pitches and adjust to some breaking balls. So I'm seeing some slight improvements. It's not what you want to see yet, but I think it's coming. With Jason Bay, it's hard to tell. I mean, it's kind of been his history since he's been here, this injury bug that's hit him. And, right now they're playing well without him. So it's almost, you're not quite sure you want to rush him back when you see the way that Neuenhuis has been playing and Baxter, of course, the local kid. So, I obviously want to have Bay back at some point, but I think it's one of those things the Mets are better off just kind of keeping him there for now.
And, of course, the Mets are very competitive early on with a winning record. They're going through a tough stretch now where they have some real good teams coming in. Do you think come the end of July the Mets will be players as far as acquiring players? Do you think they might be looking to trade players at the trading deadline?
I think the main thing, if you look at the Mets, their bullpen has been up and down, more down than up, but in their ERA is one of the worst in it's actually the worst in the National League. So if they're going to be in this thing and stay in this thing, they got to improve the bullpen. Right now, you can't find that piece out there. You can find a guy from within, but there's not a trade that you can make to improve, and there's not really a starter that you can make. So this part of the schedule, with all the teams above 500 that they have coming up, we're going to find out at the end of this if they're going to be in. I think they're a borderline team, whether they can stay in it or not. Hopefully they can. It's a lot more fun around New York in the summertime when they're playing well.
Sure. Of course, you've gone from the executive office to the broadcast booth. How do you look at things from a different perspective now that you're in the broadcast booth as opposed to being a GM?
The one thing I try to do is I try to look at things in the broadcast booth like my old job, and try to give that perspective as a general manager or as an evaluator, because there's not a lot of former GMs that are in these jobs. There's only a couple of them, and I'm not telling them how good this job is. So I'm going to keep them in their front office jobs and let that play out. So I try to. That's how I'm looking at it. I'm trying to look at it from an evaluation standpoint. Just kind of add a little extra insight, maybe a statistical analysis that no one really thought about or looked at, and hopefully the listener is saying, oh, what, that's a pretty interesting point.
It's almost been 10 years really since the famous Scott Kazmir trade, but now time has proven you right. What did you know about Scott that you weren't telling everybody?
Well, I think that it wasn't necessarily about the evaluation of Scott, because we liked Scott, but we thought that there'd be some injury issues. We knew there wasn't a great work ethic, but it was about the player we got back. That was where the evaluation went wrong. The guy that really knew Victor Zambrano was the one who really stuck his neck out and said, hey, this guy is going to be a number one starter with a couple minor adjustments, and clearly he didn't turn out that way and he got injured. So, that's, I think in hindsight, that's the whole issue with that trade was and it's really the way that in any trade, the guy that you come back that maybe we haven't seen in the front office, you kind of shudder if you put your trust in your scouts and hope it works out, and that one obviously didn't work out.
Jim Duquette live here from CitiField as the planes are going above. Thank you very much.